welcome you watching a very special episode of This is Exclusive live from Tianjin, the venue of the largest ever SCO Summit. For India, it has been undoubtedly one of the most successful summit. Over the next few hours, I'm going to take you through a detailed conversation with a journalist from across the globe. What do they essentially think about the summit? What is it that their own respective countries have achieved? And not just that, a super exclusive coming up tonight on This is Exclusive. I want to start the edition sharing a story. The story of President Vladimir Putin and Prime Minister Modi and the meeting that took place. And it's fascinating to say the least. Ladies and gentlemen, the bilateral meeting that took place between both the leaders. In fact, this was immediately after the 25th meeting of the heads of state of the SCO. And after that meeting, both the leaders decided to hop on to the Arnab, which happens to be the black limousine of President Putin. What we are given to understand is that they were basically headed to Ritz-Carlton. That's where President Putin has been staying, and that was the venue of the bilateral meeting between India and Russia. The moment the leaders actually reached the hotel, the motor car stopped and the delegation from both sides left from there. They were heading towards the hotel. It turns out that both the leaders did not step out of the limousine. In fact, that meeting lasted for almost 50 minutes. Interesting to point out is that during this entire meeting, they were alone. There were no translators. What we do not know is the content of the conversation that took place between Prime Minister Modi and President Putin, and perhaps that is going to be in the realm of speculation. But one thing is very clear. It was an unusual format that was adopted by both the leaders, breaking all kinds of protocols. It's very unusual that world leaders would break this kind of a protocol and decide to be inside their car and have a chat session. What was the session all about? We do not know. Thereafter, the leaders then walked towards the negotiation room where the delegation was already waiting. It turns out that the delegation was waiting for quite some time. And then the bilateral meeting began, and that too lasted for almost 50 minutes. Again, a departure from the usual tradition, because there is a scheduled time that has been allotted. It turns out that they even moved away from that. Both the leaders addressed each other as my dear friend. And there was a lot that was basically taken into account, and a lot that was actually achieved by both the leaders in terms of a roadmap that was also laid out by both the leaders as to how exactly will both the countries really move ahead. How would they surge ahead? Now, that's the inside story of that brilliant bilateral meeting that took place. In fact, we were the only network to get our hands on this particular information, something that has now been confirmed by both sides, Russia as well as India. The big takeaways coming in from the SCO meet. The big headline, of course, was the bilateral meeting between India and China. President Xi invokes the civilization ties and says that we are cooperative partners and not rivals. Prime Minister Modi was very clear that we cannot avoid talking about cross-border terrorism, and it is something that cannot be brushed under the carpet. As far as border management is concerned, there too a resolution is essentially being found. The phrase that caught everyone's eyes, that was what President Xi essentially said, that the elephant and a dragon can dance together. The reason why we are saying that this has been a huge success for India, that's because all through India has essentially spoken about the need to include the word terrorism in the joint declaration, and the fact that all the SCO countries should come together, speak in a unified voice as far as terrorism is concerned, combating terrorism is concerned. And in fact, this is exactly what was reflected in the joint declaration. In fact, President Xi, in his opening remarks, also made a statement about terrorism, extremism, as well as separatism. Not just that, he's also spoken about the fact that countries countries, member countries, should avoid border hostilities. And that is the reason why we are saying for India it has been a huge success. Of course, the image of Prime Minister right in between, flanked by Russian President Vladimir Putin on one side, on the other was of course Chinese President Xi Jinping.
SCO के 25वें शिखर सम्मेलन में भाग लेते हुए मुझे खुशी हो रही है। हमारे शानदार स्वागत और आतिथ्य सत्कार के लिए मैं राष्ट्रपति शी का हार्दिक आभार व्यक्त करता हूं। आज उज्बेकिस्तान का इंडिपेंडेंस डे है। कल किर्गिस्तान का राष्ट्रीय दिवस था। इस अवसर पर मैं दोनों लीडर्स को बधाई और शुभकामनाएं देता हूं। एक्सेलेंसी, पिछले 24 वर्षों में एससीओ का पूरे यूरेशिया क्षेत्र की एक्सटेंडेड फैमिली को जोड़ने में बहुत महत्वपूर्ण योगदान रहा। भारत ने एक सक्रिय सदस्य के रूप में हमेशा कंस्ट्रक्टिव और सकारात्मक भूमिका निभाई है। एससीओ को लेकर भारत की सोच और नीति 3 मुख्य स्तंभों पर आधारित है। SCO, S सिक्योरिटी, C कनेक्टिविटी, O अपॉर्चुनिटी। पहले स्तंभ S यानी सिक्योरिटी के संदर्भ में मैं कहना चाहता हूं कि सुरक्षा, शांति और स्थिरता किसी भी देश के विकास का आधार है। किंतु इस मार्ग में आतंकवाद, अलगाववाद और अतिवाद बड़ी चुनौतियां हैं। आतंकवाद सिर्फ किसी देश की सुरक्षा ही नहीं बल्कि पूरी मानवता के लिए एक साझा चुनौती है। कोई देश, कोई समाज, कोई नागरिक अपने आप को इससे सुरक्षित नहीं समझ सकता। इसलिए आतंकवाद से लड़ाई में
Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, there seems to be a major climb down by Donald Trump. Donald Trump has put out a post now on tariffs. He says what few people understand is that we do very little business with India, but they do a tremendous amount of business with us. In other words, they sell us massive amounts of goods, their biggest client, but we sell them very little. Until now, a totally one-sided relationship, and it's been for many decades. The reason is that India has charged us until now such high tariffs, the most of any country, that our businesses are unable to sell into India. It's been a totally one-sided disaster. Also, India buys most of its oil and military products from Russia, very little from America. They have now offered to cut their tariffs to nothing. But it's getting late. They should have done so years ago. Just some simple facts for people to ponder. This is what Donald Trump has just said. We'll try and get Abhishek Kapoor live as well with us here in the newsroom. And Donald Trump has not mentioned the India-Pakistan ceasefire here. This comes on a day when all three leaders, Modi, Xi Jinping, Vladimir Putin, were in Tianjin, and those pictures relaying around the world. Donald Trump has spoken tariffs in what is one of his first posts, by the way. Donald Trump has been he's been nowhere in the picture for the last almost 5 to 6 days. Hasn't been seen in public, hasn't been making any comments, and he says that it may be getting too late. But is he hinting about a climb down, or is he doubling down? That's the question.
He says they've now offered to cut their tariffs to nothing, but it's getting late. They should have done so years ago. Does that mean that America is not willing to agree to the tariff cut? Let's see where the story goes. We will be looking at it in great detail in a short while from now. Let's cut back to the live reports from Tianjin.
Well, in fact, I spoke to some very senior journalists from across the globe, starting with Russia. In fact, I spoke to the Russian correspondent of Sputnik based out of Beijing. Then, of course, I also had the opportunity to speak to Russia Today correspondent who was here. And then finally, the Chinese perspective coming in from a very senior journalist. Listening to what each one of them had to say. You've been in Beijing for quite some time, spent a considerable number of years. I want to ask you, in the run-up to the SCO Summit, the Chinese have essentially built a narrative, a largest ever SCO Summit. They were hoping that there would be tangibles, there would be deliverables from the SCO Summit. I want you to tell our viewers, how were you looking at this, the Beijing, how was Beijing really looking at it? How important has the SCO Summit been for Beijing?
Well, certainly China pays a lot of attention to the matters of the global south. So having all these countries together, a lot of which are the representatives of the global south, I think is very important for China. And China projects itself as one of the key magnets and one of the channels for voicing the opinions of the global south. So obviously it's very important, and China is always very enthusiastic and very carefully organizing these events and putting a lot of effort in it. So obviously it's a very big deal for China.
What's the key difference that you have essentially spotted while you were reporting in the last few days in the way we have seen the SCO Summit happening in the past, but there is a global attention right now on the SCO Summit, keeping in mind that we are talking in times of a tariff war that is going on. It's for four countries, Russia, China, as well as India. What's the sense that you've got in terms of how Beijing has been responding to the threat emanating from the United States of America?
Well, I think Beijing, it seems to me, is always taking a careful stance on all of this, but clearly you see a request from not just China but many countries that nobody is happy with how the United States behave at the moment. A lot of the countries in the global south, China included, are interested. They are one of the beneficiaries of globalization previously. So obviously there is an interest of maybe coordinating positions and finding essentially stability, and SCO is seen by many as the anchor of such stability. And so Beijing basically emphasizes the spirit of SCO, and it has indeed become, especially with the accession of countries like India, a massive anchor of stability, maybe, and dialogue and true multilateralism on the Eurasian continent, and then spreading further than that since there is more interest coming. So yeah, certainly for Beijing probably stresses even more this unity and the spirit of multilateralism around SCO.
Well, interestingly, we are talking at a time when your president is speaking. I just want to step aside and perhaps show our viewers now. In fact, Abhishek, that's the Russian president who's making the address right now. We are not very sure the content of it, which is going to come out in a short while from now. I want to come back to the big headline that emerged yesterday. That was the bilateral talk between India and China. How was Russia really viewing the rapprochement between India and China?
Well, since I can't say I really followed the media because I was pretty busy here at the summit, but overall I think that every such signal is seen very positively in Russia, because Russia has good relations with both countries historically. And I think any sign of maybe finding some compromise and having some degree of rapprochement is seen very positively in Russia. And certainly Russia would like to maintain this RIC format, so it's a good thing, definitely.
Do you believe that could be a reality, the RIC, the trilateral, at some point in time?
Of course, I do believe so. I think that all three parties are interested in maintaining this format.
What do you make of the images that came out from the banquet yesterday? I remember what I saw was a considerable amount of time that has been spent by President Xi and President Putin, where they were basically interacting. I was given to understand some jokes were essentially shared. We do not know what really transpired, but what do you all really make of it? Which way is it really headed? Because I'm told the advisor to President Putin essentially indicated that President Putin and President Xi has spoken about what happened in Alaska. So is there some sort of a talk that is going on between Russia and China with regards to how do you really tackle the situation, the challenges that are coming in from the United States of America?
It was definitely mentioned that the Russian side would update its partners, China, India, and all others, on how the process in Alaska went in Anchorage. Certainly, I think there is a stable line of contact between the leaders of Russia, China, India on this one, and China and India, they have their own diplomatic humanitarian track on this particular issue. So Moscow always underlines that it very much appreciates the balanced position that both countries have on the conflict in Ukraine, in particular. So as far as the videos that aired, they've been quite viral on Russian social networks. I noticed today. So I think I've seen a couple of headlines where it's being kind of underlined that we have like a friendly exchange. So definitely see it as a positive thing.
What are the key issues that are being raised by Moscow at this stage, and particularly the SCO Summit? What is it that we are looking forward to?
Well, from the Russian side, from the Russian delegation, I heard that there is going to be a strong, powerful declaration. We're yet to see what's going to be in it, but I think that essentially this SCO track is now a priority for Russia as far as multilateral formats are concerned, and I think everybody is awaiting, but we're not yet clear what's it gonna be. But certainly maybe some expectations on trade and just coordinated position in terms of again multilateralism, stability, geopolitics.
Let's also talk about the much-awaited bilateral between Russian President Vladimir Putin and Prime Minister Modi. What is it that Russia is looking at right now? Obviously, the stage was set in India, where we were given to understand that Russia wants to open up the market for India, keeping in mind that it's some sort of a penalty that has been imposed on India for buying Russian oil. So what is it that Russia is essentially trying to offer India at this stage?
I'm afraid I cannot really elaborate on that one because I didn't really follow this in particular. But definitely the two leaders have a lot to talk about, and certainly the whole tariff situation, Donald Trump versus India, there's been a lot of attention to that in Russia, and of course I think the matters of trade between Russia and India are in the center of attention of this meeting.
Let me get a quick analysis from a Russian journalist. Thank you very much for speaking to Republic TV.
Thank you.
The image of Russian President Vladimir Putin, along with the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Chinese President Xi Jinping, has been the biggest talk of the town.
Yes.
Give us a sense of how exactly is the Russian media really looking at the imagery coming in, and where does Russia really stand on some of the key issues?
Well, it's really obvious. It's a historical image because we all saw that Vladimir Putin and Narendra Modi, they came together, they were holding hands, and basically this means friendship, very good friendship. Then they talked to Xi Jinping, they all laughed. It was some kind of joke, so you can imagine that they are really good friends, they are really good sense of friendship between them. And also those three countries are really sanctioned and pressed by the United States. So basically what we are perceiving now, that they are getting even closer together because of the United States. And obviously we are really waiting for the outcome, for which agreements they will have. Now we're just waiting because we saw that they are really good friends, and we understand they talk a lot, and we are expecting Vladimir Putin to go to India in the end of the year. So we are waiting and expecting.
We are eagerly waiting for the bilateral talk to take place between Russian President Vladimir Putin and our Prime Minister. In terms of the expectations that the Russians have at this stage, particularly with regards to the bilateral, is there anything that you all are particularly discussing about? For instance, the tariffs that have been imposed on India has largely been because of the Russian oil that has been bought by India. A claim that has been completely rejected by India. India maintains that it's our national interest and no one has the right to interfere. How exactly is Russia really looking into the tariffs that have been imposed, or kind of a penalty that has been imposed on India?
I'll be sincere, we were really feeling curious about the India reactions because we saw these new tariffs, this high pressure of the United States against India, and we were waiting what kind of decision will take India. Will it be led away by the United States? But we saw that India stayed really firm with Russia. It's continued to work and just let understand everybody that India its sovereignty must be respected, and that's a really good political position, I think, nowadays, because they should not be led by pressure.
In terms of the expectations of the SCO outcome, India maintains that we should talk firmly about terrorism, cross-border terrorism. In fact, we have had certain expectations from the Chinese too, despite the trust deficit that exists between India and China. We do believe that Russia happens to be our all-weather friend. Is there a hope that perhaps Russia would also be pushing the SCO partners to talk firmly about cross-border terrorism?
I think yes, because Russia has a lot of history and we have a lot of experience to fight against terrorism. So I think they will talk about this and we have experience to share.
Jed is joining us. He's a senior journalist. Thank you very much for speaking to Republic TV. The big takeaways from the SCO Summit. Undoubtedly, a lot was spoken about, a lot preparations were underway. In terms of the big takeaways, what would you say? From the Chinese perspective, what is it that has been achieved so far?
We now have the Tianjin Declaration already approved by or agreed upon by the 10 full members of the SCO, including China and India. And from that document, that we can definitely see the SCO, even though the SCO started as a security-focused organization, but expanded to more about comprehensive partnerships, about economy, stability, and solidarity among these countries. And one thing also pointed out is that the declaration mentioned condemning terrorist attacks or so, and we can definitely see all those leaders are talking with each other and trying to find out this kind of mechanism that they can work together.
Well, that's all that we could pack in this edition of This Is Exclusive, a power-packed edition coming to you from Tianjin.
Amity has been ranked amongst the top 3% universities globally, a testimony to Amity's globally benchmarked quality.
जब मुंबई से वापस कोल्हापुर शिफ्ट हुआ तो सबने कहा कि ड्रीम सिटी को छोड़ रहा है। ड्रीम सिटी, मैंने कहा ड्रीम में तो यही गलियां आती। तो जब ये रियलाइज हुआ कि कुछ बड़ा करने के लिए बड़े शहर में रहने की जरूरत नहीं, तब लगा कि लाइफ में ग्रो किया।
SIP करो, इन्वेस्ट करो, लाइफ में ग्रो करो।
प्रतिभूति बाजार में निवेश बाजार जोखिमों के अधीन है। निवेश करने से पहले सभी संबंधित दस्तावेजों को ध्यान से पढ़ें।
पैसा लगाना है तो सेंचुरी क्लब प्राइम पे लगाओ। डूबेगा नहीं, जलेगा भी नहीं, कोई खा नहीं जाएगा, धोखा नहीं देगा, ऊपर नीचे भी नहीं होगा, सेफ रहेगा, सिक्योर्ड में मिनिमम 30 साल का रिटर्न देगा। अब इससे बेटर इन्वेस्टमेंट है तो बताओ। सेंचुरी क्लब प्राइम, रहो बेफिक्र।
Being a legend means reaching a point where no one else has. To give others a dream worth chasing. 10 years of Creta, legend forever.
Sarah, this is your space, play it your way.
I choose a world where we dream, and the limit is the sky, and this world is my home where I'm living my best.
Mindfully crafted home decor fabrics. Sansar, a D-Decor brand. Live consciously.
Here we didn't want to bring out the big charts because it had no chance of standing. Fortunately, we came armed with a little smaller chart. So it's 67%, so we're going to be charging a discounted reciprocal